Good evening, everyone. Tonight we travel deep into the Canadian wilderness, where silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a presence that watches, waits, and remembers. These are the places where frost clings to abandoned doorways, where logging roads disappear into forests that seem to breathe, and where small towns guard secrets they would rather bury beneath snow and time. The stories you're about to hear come from real accounts. Testimonies shared in hushed voices, incidents documented in police files that were quietly closed, and whispers passed between locals who know better than to speak too loudly after dark. These are not legends softened by generations of retelling. These are raw, recent memories that still wake people in the middle of the night, hearts pounding, wondering if that sound outside is just the wind. From the remote mining towns of British Columbia to the isolated fishing communities along the Atlantic coast, from the endless boreal forests of northern Ontario to the wind-scraped prairies of Saskatchewan, Canada's vast emptiness holds more than beauty. It holds things that defy explanation, encounters that shatter rational minds, and places where the barrier between our world and something else grows dangerously thin. If you're drawn into the kind of truth that lingers in the dark, make sure to subscribe and stay with us tonight. The photographs showed our camp from an angle that shouldn't exist. I was reviewing the trail camera footage on my laptop, going through the routine motion-triggered images we'd set up to monitor wildlife around our base camp. Deer, mostly. The occasional black bear. Once, a lynx that made us all crowd around the screen in excitement. But these photos, time-stamped at 3:47 a.m., showed our 3 tents from a position 40 feet up in the air, looking down at an angle that would require someone, or something, to be hovering in the canopy of the old-growth forest. The second image, taken 3 seconds later, was closer, 20 feet up maybe. The third was at ground level, aimed directly at the tent where I'd been sleeping. The camera had been pointed away from camp, toward the tree line. We'd checked it the evening before. My name is Marcus Highland, and at 29, I was the junior surveyor on a 3-person team working for a resource management company in the interior of British Columbia. Our job was straightforward. Catalogue old logging roads, assess regrowth patterns, mark hazardous zones in areas that hadn't seen human activity in decades. I'd always believed there was a rational explanation for everything. I believed in science, in documentation, in evidence. I believed that the wilderness, no matter how remote, was just geography. That was before the Cassiar Valley contract. Our camp was situated 12 kilometers from the nearest logging road, still maintained enough for vehicle access. We'd hiked in with our equipment, set up in a clearing that our senior surveyor, Robert Chen, had identified from satellite imagery. Good sight lines, access to a creek, relatively flat ground. Rob was 46, methodical, and had been doing this work for 20 years across British Columbia and the Yukon. If he approved a campsite, you didn't question it. The third member of our team was Ainsley Whitmore, 32, our data specialist, and the person who'd actually set up the trail cameras. She had a PhD in environmental science and a no-nonsense approach to fieldwork that I respected. When I showed her the photographs on my laptop that morning, I expected her to identify some technical glitch, some logical explanation for why our camera had apparently been moved, reoriented, and then returned to its original position. Instead, she went pale. "That's not possible," she said, zooming in on the third image. "Look at the timestamp metadata. The camera never moved. According to the accelerometer data, it stayed in the exact same position all night." "Then how?" "I don't know, Marcus, but something triggered it from those positions, something that moved at those heights." Rob dismissed it initially. Equipment malfunction. Condensation on the lens creating strange refractions. He'd seen weirder things explained by simple environmental factors. But that night, the sounds started. At first, it was just drumming, a slow, rhythmic percussion that seemed to come from deep in the forest, so low in frequency that you felt it in your chest before you heard it with your ears. Boom, boom, boom. Each beat separated by exactly 4 seconds. I timed it. Probably forestry workers, Rob said, though he didn't sound convinced. Or indigenous ceremony somewhere nearby. We're 12 kilometers from the nearest road, Ainsley said quietly. And I checked. There are no active logging permits in this watershed. No one's supposed to be out here but us. The drumming continued for 17 minutes. Then it stopped, replaced by something worse. Footsteps. Not the crack of branches underfoot or the rustle of an animal moving through bush. These were deliberate, heavy footfalls that circled our camp just beyond the firelight. Something bipedal, something large, maintaining a perfect perimeter exactly 30 feet from our tents. We could hear it crushing frost-stiffened grass, snapping twigs, but we couldn't see it. Rob swept his flashlight beam across the tree line again and again, catching nothing but dark trunks and the silver reflection of spider webs. Could be a bear, he said, but bears don't walk in perfect circles. Bears don't maintain a fixed distance, and bears don't stop moving the instant you point a light in their direction, then resume the moment the beam moves away. The footsteps circled us for an hour. None of us slept that night. At first light, we investigated. Rob was experienced in tracking. He'd worked with conservation officers before. And what we found made no sense. The prints were there, large humanoid impressions in the soft ground and frost. But they appeared and disappeared randomly. A series of 5 clear tracks, then nothing for 6 feet, then 3 more prints, then a gap of 10 feet. As if whatever made them was sometimes walking on the ground and sometimes not. This is ridiculous, Rob muttered, photographing each print with a scale bar. Prints don't just stop in the middle of stride, but they did. Again and again around our camp, the trail would simply end, with no indication that anything had jumped or changed direction. The prints would just resume several feet away, continuing the same circular path. Ainsley was scanning the area with a handheld GPS mapping the print locations. "Marcus," she called out, "come look at this." She showed me her screen. When plotted, the prints formed a pattern. A circle, yes, but with specific gaps. The gaps were exactly equidistant, perfect intervals, geometric. "That's not an animal," she said quietly. "Animals don't move in geometric patterns." We should have left then. Rob argued for it, but we had a contract, a deadline, and we'd only completed about 60% of our survey work. We were professionals. We had jobs to do, and in the daylight, with birds singing and squirrels chittering in the trees, the night before felt like it could be rationalized, could be explained. That afternoon, we split up to cover more ground. Standard procedure. We each had GPS, satellite phones, and check-in protocols. I was surveying a section of old road about 2 kilometers west of camp when I found the church. It wasn't on any of our maps. A small wooden structure, maybe 20 by 30 feet, sitting in a clearing that had clearly been abandoned for decades. The white paint was peeling in long curls, revealing gray wood beneath. The cross that had once stood on the roof peak lay in the grass, broken in 2. All the windows were intact, which seemed strange for a building this old and neglected. The door was open. I should mention that I'm not a superstitious person. I was raised Presbyterian but lapsed in college, and I'd never put much stock in the supernatural. But standing in front of that open door, looking into the darkness inside, every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around. I went in anyway, because that's what curious, rational people do when they find something unexpected. We investigate. The interior was a single room with a small raised platform where an altar had once stood. The altar was gone now, leaving only mounting holes in the floor. Wooden pews lay toppled and scattered as if something had thrashed through the space. The walls were covered in writing. Not graffiti, not the casual vandalism you'd expect in an abandoned building. This was careful, repetitive script in what looked like charcoal or ash. The same phrases over and over in English, and what I later learned was carrier, the local indigenous language. It walks between. Do not call it. The forest remembers. 3 drums means run. And then, larger than the rest, written across the entire back wall. It wears what it finds. The temperature dropped as I stood there reading. Dropped significantly, as if I'd walked into a freezer. My breath misted in front of my face. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not my own. This was behind me. Slow and deliberate, the sound of lungs much larger than human inflating and deflating. I turned around. Nothing. But the breathing continued, and now I could hear something else beneath it. A wet, sliding sound, like something being dragged across the wooden floor. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran, bursting out of that church and not stopping until I was halfway back to camp, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might be having a cardiac event. When I radioed Rob and Ainsley, trying to explain what I'd experienced, I could hear the skepticism in Rob's voice. You're spooked, Marcus. Understandable after last night, but old buildings make sounds. Wood settles, air pressure changes. But he agreed we should all return to camp early. As we gathered around the fire that evening, I insisted on showing them the church the next day. Something about it felt important, felt like a warning. We never got the chance. That night, the drumming returned. But this time it was different. 3 beats, rapid, urgent, boom, boom, boom. Then silence, then, from a different direction, 3 more beats. Boom, boom, boom. Then another direction. And another. Multiple sources surrounding us, the drums answering each other in some kind of coordinated pattern. And with the drumming came the voices. Not words, not language, just sounds that approximated human speech, rising and falling in pitch, sometimes almost laughing, sometimes almost screaming. They came from the darkness beyond our fire, from multiple directions, calling back and forth to each other. And they were getting closer. We're leaving, Rob said, his voice tight. Now, pack the essentials. We hike out tonight. It was a 6-hour hike back to the vehicle in daylight. At night, on rough terrain, it would take longer, but none of us argued. We could feel it now, all of us, the presence of something malevolent, something that had been watching us, studying us, and had now decided to do more than watch. We were 300 meters from camp, hiking single file with headlamps, when Ainsley stopped. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, Marcus, look." She was pointing her light up into the trees. There were dozens of them. Figures hanging in the canopy, suspended somehow among the branches, 30 and 40 feet up. They were wearing clothes. Old, rotted clothes, logger jackets and work pants, and even what looked like a faded dress. But the proportions were wrong. The limbs were too long, and they were all oriented the same way, heads down, facing us, watching us. "Don't stop," Rob hissed. "Keep moving. Don't look at them. Just keep moving." But it was hard not to look, because as we walked, they moved, swinging from branch to branch, paralleling our path, staying just at the edge of our lights, not pursuing us directly, but herding us. I realized with cold certainty that they were pushing us in a specific direction, away from the vehicle. "We need to change course," I said. "If we go off trail at night, they're not letting us go to the truck, Rob. Look at the pattern. Every time we angle toward the road, they cut us off." He saw it then. We all did. Whatever these things were, they understood our objective and were actively preventing us from reaching it. We were being herded like animals, pushed deeper into the forest, toward something. Toward the church. I could see it ahead through the trees, that white structure glowing faintly in our headlamp beams. The door was still open, and standing in that doorway was a figure. It was wearing Robert's jacket, his red survey jacket with the reflective tape, but Rob was right behind me. I could hear him breathing. The thing in the doorway moved, and I saw that it was wearing other things too. A patchwork of clothing, items I now recognized from the hanging figures in the trees. It had made itself a costume of human possessions, draped across a frame that was decidedly not human. It wears what it finds. The drumming erupted from all sides, deafening, and the forest came alive with movement. The hanging figures dropped from the trees like spiders, and the thing in the doorway stepped forward into the clearing, and I saw what was beneath the clothes. We scattered. I don't remember the next few hours clearly. I remember running, falling, getting up, running more. I remember branches tearing at my face and the sound of those things crashing through the bush behind us, sometimes on the ground, sometimes, impossibly, through the canopy above. I remember Rob screaming, a sound that cut off too abruptly. I remember Ainsley next to me one moment and gone the next, her headlamp beam spiraling crazily before winking out. I remember reaching the logging road as dawn broke, collapsing on the gravel and realizing I was alone. The RCMP search went on for 11 days. They found our camp intact, all our equipment still there, our supplies untouched. They found the trail camera. It had no photographs after the ones I'd shown Ainsley. They followed our hiking path out, found the point where we'd gone off trail, found signs of multiple people moving quickly through difficult terrain. They never found Rob or Ainsley. They did find the church. When I described it, a local carrier elder who'd been brought in to help with the search went quiet for a long moment. Then he told the RCMP that the area had been abandoned in the 1950s after a mission priest disappeared. The locals had refused to return. There were stories of something that lived in that part of the forest, something that predated European contact, something their ancestors had known to avoid. The people stopped using those hunting grounds, he said. There was a reason. The official report listed Rob and Ainsley as missing, presumed dead, likely due to exposure or animal attack. Hypothermia was mentioned. Disorientation. The case is still technically open, but no one's actively investigating. I left surveying. I left British Columbia entirely. I'm back in Ontario now, working a desk job, living in the city where there are always people and lights and the comforting sounds of traffic. But I still can't sleep without a light on. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it. That slow drumming. Boom, boom, boom. Just at the edge of hearing, just far enough away that I can almost convince myself it's my imagination. But I know better. I know that something in the Cassiar Valley is still out there, still watching those forests, still waiting for the next people who wander too far into places humans were never meant to go. If you're ever surveying remote areas, if you're ever camping in regions that seem too quiet and you hear drumming in the night, don't wait to find out what's making it. Don't investigate the abandoned buildings you find in clearings that aren't on any map. And if you see figures in the trees wearing clothes they shouldn't have, run. Just run, and don't look back. Because some things in the Canadian wilderness aren't wildlife. They're something else entirely. Something ancient, and they're still there, watching the tree line, waiting for the curious, the skeptical, the ones who think they can explain everything with science. I used to be one of those people. I'm not anymore. The phone call came through on a line that had been disconnected for 6 years. I was processing telecommunications outage reports in our regional operations center when the system flagged an anomaly. An active call originating from a number registered to a residence in Clarenville, Newfoundland. a property that had been abandoned since 2017 and whose service had been terminated when the last occupant died. Yet according to our network monitors, someone had been on that line for 47 minutes and the call was still ongoing. The protocol for this kind of system glitch was straightforward. Log the anomaly, dispatch a technician to physically verify the line status, close the ticket. But there was something in the metadata that made me pause. The call had been routed through our emergency services interface. Whoever was on that deadline had dialed 911. My name is Deirdre Sullivan, and at 34, I was a senior network analyst for Atlantic Communications, one of the primary telecom providers serving Atlantic Canada. I'd been with the company for 9 years, working my way up from customer service to network operations, and I'd seen every kind of technical malfunction you could imagine. I'd investigated ghost rings, phantom voicemails, crossed lines that connected strangers in impossible ways. There was always an explanation. Water damage, corroded terminals, electromagnetic interference, or simple human error in our database. But I'd never seen a call from a deadline that lasted 47 minutes, and I'd never seen one routed as a 911 emergency. I pulled up the call record. The timestamp showed it had started at 11:43 p.m. the previous night. It was now 12:30 p.m. That meant someone, or something, had been connected for over 12 hours. I checked the audio logs, expecting silence or dead air. There was a voice. I shouldn't have listened to it without authorization. Privacy regulations are strict, but the 911 routing meant this was potentially an emergency services matter, and I had clearance to monitor emergency calls for quality assurance. I told myself I was following protocol. I wish I'd never pressed play. The voice was female, middle-aged, speaking in a steady, calm tone. She was describing a house, her house, describing it room by room, detail by detail, as if giving a tour to someone who couldn't see. The kitchen with its yellow wallpaper. The living room with the television that only got 3 channels. The bedroom with the window that overlooked the cove. And then she said, "But you need to understand, I can't leave. I've tried the front door, but it won't open from the inside anymore. I've tried the windows, but they're painted shut. And the basement door keeps opening, even when I lock it. There's something in the basement. It climbs the stairs at night. I can hear it on the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 steps from the basement to the hall, and then it waits outside my bedroom door." I felt cold, despite the overheated operations center. The voice continued. "I called before, years ago. I told them there was something wrong with this house, that I could hear things moving in the walls, that the doors wouldn't open properly. They said it was my imagination. They said I was confused, but I'm not confused. I know what I hear, and I know it's getting braver. It used to only come up when it was dark. Now it comes up during the day. Now it started trying the bedroom door handle." I checked the address again. 47 Shoreline Road, Clarenville. I pulled up the property records through our integrated municipal database. The last registered occupant was Meredith Tobin, deceased August 2017 at age 63. Cause of death, natural causes, found unresponsive in her home by a neighbor. The property had been tied up in a state probate, left to a nephew who lived in Alberta and had never bothered to claim it. It sat empty, gradually deteriorating, waiting for someone to either buy it or tear it down. The voice on the recording was still talking. Still describing the house, but now she was describing something else. "It's tall, taller than a person should be. It has to bend down to fit through the doorway. I saw it last Tuesday when I looked through the crack under my bedroom door. I saw its feet. They're not right. The joints bend the wrong way. And the skin looks wet, like something that lives under rocks. It stood there for 3 hours. Just stood there outside my door. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, and eventually it went back downstairs. But it's getting impatient. I can tell. It wants me to open the door." My hands were shaking. This had to be a recording, some kind of audio file playing on a loop. Except the metadata showed it was a live call. And now, as I listened, I heard something in the background. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps, and counting. The woman's voice changed, becoming tighter. It's coming up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's in the hallway. It's outside the door. The call ended. The timestamp showed it had disconnected at exactly 12:47 p.m. after 13 hours and 4 minutes. I sat there staring at my screen, my heart hammering. Around me, the operations center hummed with normal activity. Analysts at their workstations, the murmur of calls being handled, the soft beep of monitoring equipment. I should have filed a report, should have flagged it for my supervisor. Instead, I did something incredibly stupid. I called the number. It rang. 6 times. Then someone picked up. "Hello?" The voice was female, middle-aged, calm. "This is Deirdre Sullivan with Atlantic Communications. I'm calling about a service anomaly associated with this number. Can you confirm your location?" 47 Shoreline Road. The voice was pleasant, conversational. "I'm so glad you called back. I wasn't sure anyone was listening." "Ma'am, our records show that this line was disconnected in 2017. How are you?" "I know it's been a long time," she interrupted gently. "I know you think I'm not here, but I am. I've been here the whole time, even after. Do you understand? Even after what happened, I was still here." My mouth was dry. "Ma'am, what's your name?" Meredith Tobin, and I need you to understand something, Deirdre. It can make the phone work. It wants someone to listen. It's been using my voice to call for help because it learned that's what gets attention. It learned from watching me, all those years I lived here. All those times I called and no one came, and now it's using what it learned." "What is it, Meredith?" "I don't know what it is. I just know it lives in the foundation of this house. I think it's been here longer than the house. I think the house was built over something that was already here, something that was sleeping or waiting. And I think I woke it up. All those years of living here, walking on the floors, running water through the pipes, opening and closing doors. I think I woke it up. And by the time I realized, it was too late. Ma'am, I'm going to send someone to check on you. I'm dead, Deirdre. I died 6 years ago in my bedroom. Heart attack. They found me 3 days later. But whatever is in this house, it keeps some kind of impression. Like a recording, but not quite. It can play me back. It can use my voice. And it's been calling ever since, trying to get someone to come here. The line crackled with static. "Don't send anyone," the voice said. And now it sounded different, distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Don't send anyone to this house. It's waiting for that. It wants someone to open the front door, the door that won't open from the inside. Do you understand? It's a trap." The call ended. I sat frozen at my workstation for a long time. Then I did what I should have done at the beginning. I escalated to my supervisor, a man named Gordon Price, who'd been with the company for 26 years. I played him the recordings, showed him the metadata, explained the impossibility of what I documented. Gordon listened to everything. Then he closed my laptop and looked at me seriously. "This stays between us," he said. "No official report, no ticket. This conversation never happened." "Gordon, we have to—" "Deirdre." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "This isn't the first time. That property has been flagged in our system since 2013. Multiple customers, multiple reports of strange calls, voices on lines that shouldn't be active, calls that route through the system but don't show on bills. And every single time we send a technician, something goes wrong." He opened his own laptop, pulled up files I'd never had clearance to see. 2013. Technician named Paul Hennessy went to check the line at that address. Never came back to his truck. Found 3 days later in the basement, unresponsive, severe dehydration. No memory of what happened. Quit the company immediately after. 2015, technician Sonia Driscoll. Same situation. Found in the house. Catatonic. Hospitalized for a week. Won't talk about what she saw. 2017, that's when Meredith Tobin died. After that, we blacklisted the property. Anyone who gets assigned a call to that address, we cancel it. We reroute. We make excuses. That's insane, I said. We can't just ignore. We can, and we do. Because the alternative is sending more people into that house, and I'm not doing that. Then we call the police. We call the provincial authorities. And tell them what? That a dead woman is making phone calls? That our system routes active calls from a disconnected line? Deirdre, we're a telecommunications company. Our job is to maintain the network, not investigate paranormal activity. But I couldn't let it go. That night I drove to Clarenville. It's a small town on the eastern coast of Newfoundland. A community of about 6,000 people clustered around a harbor. 47 Shoreline Road was exactly what I'd expected. A small 2-story house with peeling paint, overgrown yard, windows dark and empty. I sat in my car across the street for an hour, watching. The house looked dead, abandoned. Nothing moved in the windows. No lights, no signs of life. But the phone line was still active. I could see it on my mobile monitor. The house was drawing power through the line, enough for a low-level connection. Not enough to run anything major, but enough for a phone to work. I should have driven away. Instead, I got out of the car and walked to the front door. It was locked. I tried the handle, peered through the dusty window beside it. The interior was dim, but I could make out shapes. Furniture covered in sheets. A hallway extending into darkness, a staircase leading up. And then I saw it. A figure, standing at the top of the stairs. Too tall, joints wrong. It was looking down at me. My phone rang. I pulled it from my pocket with shaking hands. The number on the screen was 47 Shoreline Road. I answered. You shouldn't have come here. The voice was Meredith's, but wrong, layered with something else beneath it. It's been waiting for someone like you. Someone curious, someone who listens. It learned that people come when someone calls for help. And now you've heard the call. Now you know the address. It knows you'll come back. They always come back. What do you want? Want? The voice laughed, a sound like grinding glass. It doesn't want anything. It just is. It exists in this space, and it's learned to reach beyond it. Through the lines, through the voices it collects. You think Meredith is the only one? You think she's the first? The figure at the top of the stairs moved, beginning to descend. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. I ran. I got in my car and drove back to St. John's, breaking every speed limit. I called Gordon from the road, told him everything. There was a long silence. You went to the house? Yes. You answered a call from the house? Yes. Another silence. Deirdre, listen to me very carefully. That property is going to be demolished. The provincial government has been trying to condemn it for years, and the owners finally agreed. It's scheduled for August. Until then, you're going to stay away from it. You're not going to monitor that line. You're not going to answer calls from that number. Do you understand? Gordon, we can't just... Yes, we can. We have to. Because whatever is in that house, it feeds on attention. It grows stronger when people engage with it. The more you listen, the more you respond, the more reach it has. The best thing we can do is starve it. Ignore it. Let it sit in that rotting house until the bulldozers come. He was right. I knew he was right. But for weeks afterward, my phone would ring at random times. Always the same number, always 47 Shoreline Road. I never answered, but I could see the voicemails accumulating. I never listened to them. The house was demolished on August 14th. I watched the news coverage from my apartment. The demolition crew reported no issues, just an old house coming down. But I noticed something in the background of one shot. One of the workers standing apart from the others, staring at the rubble pile, his expression blank. He looked like he was listening to something. The call stopped after the demolition. The number was finally, truly disconnected. But our system still shows anomalies in that area. Calls that route strangely, voices on lines that sound wrong. And sometimes, late at night in the operations center, when I'm monitoring the network, I see brief connections from coordinates that match where that house used to stand. Nothing ever stays on the line long enough to trace. Just a few seconds of connection, then silence. But I wonder what it's doing now, that thing that lived in the foundation. I wonder if it's still there beneath the empty lot, still reaching out through whatever pathways it learned to access. And I wonder if it's getting better at it. Learning, adapting, waiting for the next time someone builds something over the space where it sleeps. The official company position is that the Clarenville anomalies were due to aging infrastructure and have been resolved. That's the story for the records. But I still have those recordings. I keep them backed up in 3 separate locations. Not because I want to listen to them again. I never want to hear that voice, nor those footsteps, or that counting ever again. I keep them because I think someone should know. I think people should understand that there are places where something went wrong a long time ago, where something that shouldn't exist found a way to persist, to reach out, to use our technology against us. If you ever get a call from a number you don't recognize, and the voice on the other end sounds just slightly wrong, just slightly off in timing or tone, hang up, don't engage, don't ask questions, because somewhere, in some abandoned place, something might be learning your voice, and it might decide to use it. The deer in the photograph was standing on 2 legs. I was reviewing the SD card from my trail camera, scrolling through the usual parade of wildlife that wandered past my property. White-tailed does, the occasional coyote, raccoons getting into things they shouldn't. But this image stopped me cold. The deer was upright, perfectly balanced on its hind legs, front hooves hanging at its sides in a posture that was disturbingly human-like. And it was facing the camera directly, head lowered, staring into the lens. The timestamp said 3:23 a.m. The next photo, taken 3 seconds later by the motion trigger, showed empty forest. The deer was gone. My name is Thomas Blackwood, and at 41 I lived alone on 70 acres of forested property outside of Wawa, Ontario. I'd moved here 7 years earlier, burned out from corporate law in Toronto, looking for quiet, for space, for something that felt more real than the life I'd been living. I'd built a modest cabin, learned to manage the wood stove, spent my days doing freelance contract work online, and my evenings hiking the game trails that crisscrossed my land. I'd always loved wildlife. That's why I'd set up the trail cameras, to document what shared this space with me. I'd captured beautiful images over the years. A young black bear scratching its back against a tree, a lynx with 2 kittens, a bull moose at dusk, antlers silhouetted against the darkening sky, nature in its raw, unguarded moments. But I'd never captured anything like this. I posted the image on a wildlife photography forum I frequented, asking if anyone had seen deer exhibit this kind of behavior. The responses ranged from technical explanations. Deer will sometimes rear up when fighting or reaching for browse, to jokes about cryptids. But several commenters noted what I'd already noticed. The posture was too stable, too balanced. Deer can rear up briefly, but they don't stand fully upright like that. Their anatomy doesn't allow for it. One commenter sent me a private message. His username was Northern Tracker 28, and his message was blunt. Where was this taken? That's not normal deer behavior. Delete the post and tell me the location. I ignored the message. It felt paranoid. But that night, I went back through the trail cam footage more carefully, looking at images from the weeks leading up to the standing deer. I found the progression. 3 weeks earlier, the deer had appeared on camera for the first time. Normal four-legged stance, grazing at the edge of the frame. 2 weeks earlier, another image, closer to the camera. 1 week earlier, closer still. Then, 5 days before the standing image, there was a photo of the deer sitting, not lying down to rest, sitting, haunches on the ground, front legs extended in a posture I'd only ever seen dogs adopt. And in each image, the deer was facing the camera. I felt sick looking at them. The progression was deliberate. The deer was getting closer, adopting more and more unnatural positions, as if it was practicing, learning how to move in ways deer don't move. I sent the full sequence to Northern Tracker 88. His response came within an hour. You need to take down all your trail cameras. Now. Tonight. Don't go out there alone and don't go after dark. Whatever you do, don't try to track it. I've seen this before. 3 years ago near Chapleau. It doesn't end well. What do you mean you've seen this before? I typed back. What is it? I don't know what it is. I know what it does. It studies you. It learns patterns. It mimics things. And once it decides to approach, you won't see it coming. I asked him what happened near Chapleau. He didn't respond again. That should have been enough. Should have been the moment I packed up, drove to Wawa, stayed in a motel until I could figure out what to do. But 70 acres of forest in northern Ontario isn't cheap, and I'd invested everything in this property. This was my home, and I'm not someone who spooks easily. I decided to take down the trail cameras at least. That much seemed reasonable. I went out the next afternoon, working my way through the game trails. Collecting the cameras one by one, I saved the furthest one for last. The camera that had captured the standing deer. It was mounted on a pine tree about half a kilometer from my cabin, overlooking a natural clearing where wildlife frequently passed through. When I reached it, I stopped. There was something in the clearing. At first, I thought it was a person, and my heart jumped. Trespassers were a constant concern this far out. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, and it was standing absolutely motionless, facing away from me. It was wearing a deer hide. I could see the head, the antlers, draped over what I could only describe as a frame. The hide didn't fit right. It bunched in places, stretched too thin in others, as if it had been pulled over something that wasn't shaped like a deer. And then it turned around. There was nothing beneath the deer hide, or rather, there was something, but I couldn't process what I was seeing. Angles that didn't make sense, proportions that hurt to look at. And where the face should have been, there was just darkness, a void that seemed to absorb light. It started walking toward me. Not the way a deer walks, not the way a human walks. It moved like someone who'd studied walking but had never actually done it. Each step deliberate and wrong, joints bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I ran. I crashed through the bush, branches tearing at my jacket, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my cabin, fumbled my keys, got inside, and locked the door. I stood there in my kitchen, shaking, trying to convince myself I'd misinterpreted what I'd seen, but I could still see it in my mind. That thing wearing the deer like a costume, turning to face me, starting its terrible walk in my direction. My phone rang. I nearly screamed, but it was just my phone, a normal call, a Toronto number I didn't recognize. I answered it, desperate for the normalcy of human contact. Mr. Blackwood, this is Detective Sarah Cormier with the Ontario Provincial Police. I'm calling about a missing persons case. I understand you live in the Wawa area, on a private property off Highway 101. Yes, that's right. We're investigating the disappearance of a hiker named Joel Pritchard. He was last seen 3 weeks ago, planning to explore some of the public trails near your area. His vehicle was found at a trailhead about 10 kilometers from your property. Did you see or hear anything unusual around that time? 3 weeks ago, when the deer first appeared on my camera. I have trail cameras on my property. I might have captured something. We'd appreciate it if you could review the footage. We're trying to establish Joel's movements. He's 36 years old, experienced outdoorsman, and his family is very concerned. I promised to review the footage and call back. Then I sat down at my computer and went through the SD cards from all my cameras, looking at images from 3 weeks ago. I found Joel Pritchard. He appeared on one of my eastern cameras on a Tuesday afternoon, hiking past with a large backpack, clearly heading deeper into the forest. He looked healthy, alert, moving with the confidence of someone who knew what he was doing. That was the last normal image. 2 days later, a different camera captured something at night, a figure, human-shaped, moving through the frame. But the movement was wrong, jerky, unstable, as if the person was injured or disoriented. 3 days later, another image. The figure was on all fours now, crawling. I zoomed in on the image, enhancing it as much as I could. The clothing looked like Joel's jacket, but the way the body was positioned, the angle of the limbs, was wrong. 4 days later, the figure was standing upright again, but taller than before, thinner, as if it had been stretched. 1 week later, there was an image of something that might have once been Joel Pritchard, but wasn't anymore. It was wearing his clothes, his backpack, but the body inside them had changed, elongated, reconfigured, and 2 weeks later, that thing had shed Joel's clothing and was wearing a deer hide instead. I called Detective Cormier back. I tried to explain what I'd found, but the words sounded insane even to my own ears. She asked me to send the images. I did. She called back an hour later. Mr. Blackwood, we're going to need you to leave your property. We're sending officers to conduct a search of the area. What did you see in the images? I saw enough to know that you shouldn't be alone out there. The OPP arrived the next morning. 4 officers with search and rescue experience. They spread out across my property and the surrounding Crown land, looking for any sign of Joel Pritchard. They found his backpack, shredded and partially buried. They found his tent, torn apart. They found bones, scattered across a wide area, picked clean. But they didn't find the thing I'd seen in the clearing. One of the officers, a man named Constable Raymond Duchesne, stayed behind after the others left. He was in his 50s, weathered and quiet, the kind of man who'd seen things he didn't talk about. You saw it, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. My grandfather was Ojibwe, he said quietly. From the Pick River First Nation, he told stories about things that lived in the deep forest, things that existed before humans, things that watched us and sometimes took an interest. He called them Wetiko, but he said that wasn't quite right, that they were older than that name. He said they were things that tried to understand us by wearing us, by taking our shape, but they never got it right. They were always just slightly wrong. How do you stop them? You don't. You leave. You let the forest keep them. I left Wawa the next day. I didn't pack everything. I left most of my belongings, my furniture, the life I'd built. I just took what fit in my truck and drove south. I put the property up for sale remotely, telling the real estate agent I'd had a family emergency and couldn't return. The property sat on the market for 2 years. No one wanted 70 acres of remote forest in northern Ontario. Then last month, I got a call from the agent. Someone had bought it. A young couple from Ottawa, looking for a wilderness retreat. I tried calling them. I tried to warn them, but they'd already moved in. Last week, the woman posted on a nature forum I monitor. She'd found the post I'd made years ago about the standing deer. She said they'd captured the same thing on their trail camera, a deer standing upright, staring at the camera, and she wanted to know if anyone had advice on what it meant. I didn't respond. What could I say? That they'd bought a property where something old and wrong lived in the forest? That it was studying them now, learning their patterns, preparing to approach? That they should leave immediately, leave everything and never come back? They wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me either before I saw it. The official explanation for Joe Pritchard's death was animal predation. Bear attack, most likely. The scattered bones, the destroyed equipment, all consistent with a bear claiming territory and defending a kill site. The case was closed, but I still have those trail camera images. I look at them sometimes, tracing that horrible progression from deer to Joel Pritchard to something that wore them both. And I wonder how many others there are, in how many deep forests, in how many remote places where humans venture but don't truly belong. I wonder if anyone else has noticed their trail cameras capturing progressions like mine. Animals behaving strangely, coming closer, adopting unnatural positions. Learning. If you monitor wildlife on your property, if you review trail camera footage and notice patterns that seem off, trust your instincts. If something is appearing repeatedly, moving closer, changing its behavior in ways that feel deliberate, don't investigate. Don't try to track it. Don't convince yourself there's a rational explanation. Just leave. Because some things in the wilderness aren't wildlife. They're something else. Something that watches and learns and occasionally decides to try on new skins. And once they've chosen you as their subject of study, the only question is how long it will take them to approach. I'm in Toronto now, 14th floor apartment, surrounded by concrete and glass and thousands of people. But sometimes at night, I dream I'm back in that clearing, and something tall and wrong is turning around to face me. And I wake up wondering if it learned enough from studying me, if it could find me, even here. If one day I'll see it again, wearing my shape, staring at me with that hollow darkness where a face should be. The emergency exit led somewhere that wasn't on the building plans. I discovered it during a routine fire safety inspection, checking that all the emergency routes in the old wing were properly marked and functional. The hospital where I worked, St. Catherine's General in Thunder Bay, Ontario, was a sprawling complex built in stages over 80 years. The original structure dated back to 1943, with additions and renovations creating a maze of wings, basements, and connecting corridors that even longtime staff members struggled to navigate. This particular exit was in sub-basement level 2, a service area that housed mechanical systems, storage, and the old morgue that hadn't been used since the new one was built in 1998. The door itself was unremarkable. Standard industrial steel with a push bar, an exit sign above it that flickered weakly. According to my diagram, it should have opened to an exterior stairwell leading up to ground level. It opened to a tunnel instead. My name is Gabriel Rousseau, and at 37, I was the safety compliance officer for St. Catherine's General. I'd been with the hospital for 12 years, working my way up from administrative assistant to my current role, and I took pride in knowing every corner of the facility. I'd inspected hundreds of rooms, checked thousands of safety systems, and I'd never encountered a space that wasn't documented. Until now. The tunnel extended into darkness beyond the reach of my flashlight. The walls were rough-hewn stone, not the poured concrete of the hospital's modern construction. The floor was uneven, sloping slightly downward. The air that wafted out was cold and smelled of damp earth and something else. Something organic and unpleasant, like meat left too long in a refrigerator. The tunnel wasn't on any of the architectural plans I carried. I checked and rechecked, thinking I'd misidentified the location. But no, this was definitely sub-basement 2, section E. and there was definitely no tunnel marked on the blueprints. I should have reported it immediately to my supervisor, Alan Wright, the facilities director. But I was curious. In 12 years, I'd never found anything that wasn't documented. This felt like a discovery, something that would prove my thoroughness, my attention to detail. I imagined presenting Alan with a full report, photographs, measurements, maybe even solving a piece of the hospital's historical puzzle. I stepped into the tunnel. The door closed behind me with a heavy metallic thud that echoed down the passage. I tried the handle. It opened normally from this side, which was good. I wasn't trapped. I proceeded forward, my flashlight beam sweeping across the stone walls, looking for any indication of what this tunnel had been used for. After about 30 meters, I found the first door. It was wooden, old, set into the stone wall on the left side. A small window at eye level, just wide enough to peer through, was covered with wire mesh. I shined my light through the mesh. The room beyond was small, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters, empty except for a metal bed frame bolted to the floor. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges in the stone arranged in patterns that might have been words but were too damaged to read. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the tunnel's temperature. I continued down the passage. More doors appeared, evenly spaced, all identical. I looked through the windows of several. All contained the same setup: a bolted bed frame, scratched walls. Some had stains on the floor that looked disturbingly like dried blood, though I told myself it was rust from water damage. The tunnel branched. One passage continued straight ahead, sloping further down. Another curved to the right. I chose the right passage, reasoning that it might curve back toward the main hospital structure, where I could perhaps identify what part of the building I was beneath. I found the operating theater. That's the only term that fit. A larger room, maybe 10 meters across, with a central table, metal, with restraints. Surrounding it were tiers of benches, like amphitheater seating, rising up toward the ceiling. Everything was covered in dust and decay, but the purpose of the space was unmistakable. This was a place where people had gathered to watch procedures performed on whoever was strapped to that table. I took photographs with my phone, documenting everything. The camera flash illuminated details I hadn't seen in my flashlight beam. More scratches on the walls, some forming clear words now. Help was repeated dozens of times. Let me out. And in one corner, in letters 2 feet high, they're still here. My phone battery died. Just dropped from 60% to 0 in an instant. The screen went black. My flashlight flickered, and somewhere in the darkness behind me, I heard footsteps. Not the echo of my own movement. These were distinct, separate, coming from back the way I'd entered. Slow, shuffling steps that scraped against the stone floor. I turned, shining my weakening flashlight back down the tunnel. Nothing visible. But the footsteps continued, getting closer. I ran. I chose the passage I hadn't explored, the one that sloped downward, reasoning that whatever was behind me was between me and the exit. I'd find another way out. This was a hospital. There had to be multiple exits, multiple connections to the surface. The tunnel descended steeply. My footsteps echoed. Behind me, the shuffling steps continued, maintaining their pace, never speeding up, never falling behind. Just following, inevitable, patient. I reached another junction, 3 passages this time. I chose the middle one at random, desperate now, my flashlight dimming further. Then I saw light ahead. Not daylight, but artificial light, fluorescent and steady. I emerged into a space that made my mind rebel. It was a hospital ward. Beds lined both walls, maybe 20 in total. But the style was wrong. This was equipment from decades ago, maybe the 1960s or 70s. Everything was in perfect condition, clean, well-maintained. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and in each bed lay a patient. They were all asleep or unconscious. I couldn't tell. They were wearing hospital gowns, covered with white sheets, their faces pale and gaunt. Monitors stood beside each bed, but they weren't plugged into anything. The screens were dark. I approached the nearest bed. The patient was a man, middle-aged, his face drawn. His chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. I reached out to shake his shoulder, to wake him, to ask where the hell I was. His eyes opened. They were black, completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid darkness from lid to lid. And he smiled at me. I backed away, horror rising in my throat. Every patient in the ward was opening their eyes now, all of them revealing that same impossible blackness. And all of them were smiling, their mouths stretching too wide, revealing too many teeth. They began to sit up. I ran again, back into the tunnels, my flashlight nearly dead. I could hear them behind me now. Not just the shuffling footsteps, but a chorus of them. Dozens of feet scraping against stone, moving in unison, following. I ran blind, taking turns at random, my breath coming in ragged sobs. And then my flashlight died completely, and I was in absolute darkness, my hands on the stone walls. Stumbling forward, and the footsteps were everywhere, echoing from every direction, closing in. My hand hit a door. I fumbled for the handle, found it, pushed through. I emerged into the morgue. The old morgue, the one that hadn't been used in 25 years. I recognized it from the layout, though I'd never actually been inside before. The walls were lined with cold storage drawers, the kind that pull out on rollers. A single overhead light flickered weakly, just enough to see. The footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. I stood there in the morgue, my back to the door I'd just come through, staring at the rows of drawer fronts. None of them were labeled. None showed any sign of recent use. And then, one by one, they began to open. Not pulled from outside, pushed from inside. The drawers slid out smoothly, silently, until they extended fully from the wall. And from several of them, things sat up. They looked like corpses. Gray skin, sunken features, vacant expressions, but they moved with fluid grace as they climbed out of the drawers, their joints bending in ways that suggested they weren't suffering from rigor mortis. One of them turned to look at me. Its eyes were black, like the patients in the ward. When it spoke, its voice was dry and hollow, like wind through a narrow gap. "You shouldn't be here. This place is for the kept ones, the ones who couldn't leave. The ones who were lost in the old medicine." "What are you?" I whispered. "We're what remains." The hospital was built over the old asylum. The asylum was built over the old quarantine house. The quarantine house was built over the old prison. And the prison was built over something older, layer after layer, century after century. And sometimes the layers bleed through. Sometimes the old medicine reaches up through the cracks. More of them were climbing out of the drawers now. 7, 8, 9 figures surrounding me, all with those black eyes, all watching with terrible patience. "You can leave," the first one said. "The door behind you leads to the old morgue, and the old morgue leads to the hospital proper. But you'll carry it with you now. You've been down here. You've seen us. You've breathed the air of the deep places. You're connected." Connected to what? To what sleeps beneath. To what remembers all the suffering that's happened in these spaces, layer after layer. Every scream, every death, every moment of anguish, it all soaks into the stone. And sometimes it wakes up. Sometimes it wants to expand. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran through the door, finding myself in the familiar space of the old morgue. The real old morgue. The documented one, with its modern locked drawers and clean floors. I ran up the stairs, through the sub-basement, into the main hospital levels, past startled nurses and orderlies, not stopping until I reached the safety office on the 3rd floor. Alan Wright found me there an hour later, sitting at my desk, shaking. I tried to explain what I'd found, but he was skeptical. We went back down together, back to sub-basement 2, Section E. The door was there, the emergency exit. But when Alan opened it, it led exactly where it should have. To an exterior stairwell, concrete and modern, rising to ground level. There was no tunnel. No stone passage, no doors leading to cells. "You've been working too hard, Gabriel," Alan said gently. "Maybe you should take a few days off." But I know what I saw, and more importantly, I know what I've been experiencing since that day. Every night I dream of the tunnels. I'm walking through them, and I can hear the footsteps behind me, and I know that if I turn around, I'll see them. The kept ones, the patients with black eyes, the things that climb out of morgue drawer. And each night, the dreams go further. Each night, I explore more of the tunnels. Each night, I get closer to whatever is at the bottom, whatever is sleeping beneath all the layers. And 3 weeks ago, I started sleepwalking. My husband found me in the kitchen, standing in front of the basement door, my hand on the handle. I didn't remember getting out of bed. 2 weeks ago, he found me in the basement itself, standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the concrete wall. Last week, he installed a lock on our bedroom door and hides the key while I sleep. Because last week, he found me in the garage with a sledgehammer, breaking through the concrete floor digging. When he woke me, I told him I needed to go deeper. I needed to find the tunnels. I needed to go back down. I'm writing this from a psychiatric facility now, a temporary stay, they tell me. Just until the medication starts working, until the episodes stop. But I know the truth. I know that whatever is beneath St. Catherine's General has reached up and touched me. I know that the layers bleed through, and I've been marked by something that lives in the deep places. The doctors show me building plans, architectural surveys, historical records. They prove that no tunnels exist beneath the hospital. They prove that I experienced a psychotic episode, a hallucination brought on by stress and fatigue. But I still have the photographs on my phone. Except when I look at them now, they're not what I remember. The operating theater is just an empty storage room. The ward with the patients is a disused mechanical space. The cells are water heater closets. The images are changing, or my memory is. And I don't know which is worse, that the tunnels aren't real, or that they're so real that they can reach through time and space to alter documentation, to change evidence, to make people forget. St. Catherine's General is still operating. It serves Thunder Bay and the surrounding region, and it's considered a good hospital, a safe hospital. The staff work there for decades, the patients receive excellent care. But sometimes, late at night, when the corridors are quiet and the shift change is hours away, people report hearing footsteps in empty hallways. They report finding doors open that should be locked. They report feeling cold drafts coming from walls that shouldn't have any gaps. And sometimes, very rarely, someone disappears during their shift. They're seen entering a supply room or a storage area, and they're never seen leaving. Security reviews the footage, but the cameras just show the person going in and nothing. They never come out. The official explanation is always the same. The person left the hospital, went home, had a personal emergency. Maybe they quit without notice. Maybe they're dealing with private issues. But I know different. I know where they went. I know they found a door that led somewhere it shouldn't, and they made the same mistake I did. They walked into the deep places, where the layers bleed through, where the old medicine still practices. If you ever work at St. Catherine's General or any old hospital built on older foundations, be careful which doors you open. Be careful which tunnels you explore. Some passages don't lead where the blueprints say they should. They lead down to where the kept ones wait, where the suffering of centuries has soaked into stone, where something sleeps and dreams and occasionally reaches up to pull curious people down into the dark. And once you've been down there, once you've breathed that air and seen those black eyes, you're connected forever. You become part of the layers, part of what's buried beneath. I can feel it now, even as I write this. The pull downward, the need to find a basement, any basement, and start digging, to find my way back to the tunnels, to return to the deep places where I belong now. The doctors say these are intrusive thoughts, symptoms of my condition. But I know the truth. The old medicine never stops practicing. It just waits for new patients. The real estate listing showed 1 bathroom. The house had 7. I discovered this during my first walkthrough as the new owner, moving room to room with the keys I'd picked up from the lawyer's office that morning. Living room, kitchen, the bathroom off the main hallway. Then upstairs, 3 bedrooms and another bathroom. That was 6 rooms total, matching the listing exactly. But when I opened what I thought was a linen closet in the upstairs hallway, I found a 3rd bathroom instead. Fully finished, completely functional, with sink and toilet and shower. A bathroom that hadn't existed in any of the photographs. A bathroom that wasn't on the floor plan I'd reviewed a dozen times before signing the papers. My name is Isaac Drummond, and at 43 I'd just bought my first house. After 2 decades of apartment living in Calgary, I'd finally saved enough for a down payment on a small property in Lethbridge, a 2-story character home built in 1967 on a quiet street lined with mature elms. The asking price had been surprisingly reasonable, below market value by almost 15%, which the realtor had attributed to the estate sale circumstances. The previous owner, a woman named Lorraine Vickers, had died intestate with no identifiable heirs, and the courts had ordered the property sold to settle debts. I'd viewed it once in person, once virtually, and both times the house had seemed perfect. A bit dated, sure, needing cosmetic updates, but structurally sound with good bones and a fenced yard. The inspection had turned up minor issues: aging roof, outdated electrical in the basement. Nothing that worried me. No one had mentioned the geometry being wrong. I stood in that 3rd bathroom, looking at my reflection in a mirror that shouldn't exist, feeling a disorientation that went beyond simple confusion. This wasn't a case of misremembering the floor plan. This was a room, a fully realized space where no room should be. The closet I'd expected would have been maybe 2 feet deep. This bathroom was 8 feet by 6 feet, with a window overlooking the backyard. I went back downstairs and pulled out the floor plan from my document folder, checked it against what I was seeing. The upstairs was supposed to have a central hallway with 3 bedrooms branching off it and 1 bathroom. I counted the doors in the actual hallway. There were 5 doors now, not 4. I opened the 5th door, another bedroom, smaller than the others, maybe 10 by 10 feet, but completely finished with carpet, paint, a closet. Empty of furniture, but clearly a functional space. A bedroom that hadn't existed during my walkthrough 2 weeks ago. I called my realtor, a woman named Jennifer Pasternak, who'd been nothing but professional throughout the buying process. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Jennifer, this is Isaac Drummond. I'm at the house, and there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The utilities should all be transferred. The house has extra rooms." A pause. "I'm sorry?" "There are rooms here that weren't in the listing. Rooms that weren't here when I toured the property. An extra bathroom, an extra bedroom. The floor plan doesn't match reality." Another pause, longer this time. When Jennifer spoke again, her tone had changed. "Isaac, I'm going to come over. Don't leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 15, her professional demeanor cracking when I showed her the discrepancies. We walked through together, comparing what we saw to the photographs on her tablet. The photographs clearly showed a linen closet where the bathroom now stood. They clearly showed a hallway with 4 doors, not 5. "This isn't possible," she said, but she was looking at the extra bedroom, standing in it, touching its walls. "I was here. I walked through this house 6 times with potential buyers. This room wasn't here. Could it have been hidden somehow? A false wall? And someone installed a bathroom behind a false wall, with plumbing, without anyone noticing. She shook her head. Isaac, I need to make some calls. She called her broker. The broker called the estate lawyer. The lawyer called the building inspector who'd done my pre-purchase inspection. Everyone agreed to meet at the house the following morning. That night, I slept in the house for the first time, or tried to. I set up my air mattress in the master bedroom, surrounded by the boxes I'd moved in, and lay there listening to the sounds an old house makes. Settling, creaking, the occasional pop of wood adjusting to temperature changes, and footsteps, light, quiet footsteps in the hallway. Just outside my door, pacing back and forth, steady and rhythmic, from one end of the hall to the other. At first, I told myself it was a tree branch against the siding or a rodent in the walls, but the pattern was too regular, too deliberate. Back and forth, for hours. I didn't open the door to look. Some instinct told me that would be a mistake. In the morning, I found new scratches on the hardwood floor in the hallway. Long, parallel gouges, as if something heavy had been dragged from one end to the other repeatedly. The building inspector arrived at 9 a.m., a gruff man named Dale Kowalchuk, who'd been doing this work for 30 years. He walked through with his equipment, checking walls, measuring rooms, consulting his own photographs and notes from the original inspection. "This is impossible," he kept saying. "These walls are load-bearing. This bathroom has plumbing that connects to the main stack. This bedroom has electrical that ties into the panel. These aren't additions. These are part of the original structure. But they weren't here 3 weeks ago." I would have noted them. I would have charged for inspecting them. The estate lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chow, pulled me aside. "Mr. Drummond, I think we need to discuss the possibility of nullifying the sale. This property was misrepresented. By who? Everyone agrees the house has changed since the listing was created. That's not misrepresentation. That's something else." "Then what is it?" I didn't have an answer. None of us did. We stood in the living room, 5 professionals, staring at a house that had somehow grown without anyone noticing. Jennifer was researching on her phone. "The original owner," she said. "Lorraine Vickers. How did she die?" Patricia consulted her files. "Natural causes. Heart attack. She was found in the upstairs hallway by a neighbor who had a key. She'd been dead approximately 3 days. Was there anything unusual about the circumstances?" "Not according to the police report. Elderly woman, history of cardiac issues, died alone at home. Tragic, but not suspicious." "What about before that? Any complaints from neighbors? Any issues with the property?" Patricia made a call, spoke quietly, then hung up. "The neighbor who found her says Lorraine had become reclusive in the last year of her life. Stopped answering the door, stopped maintaining the yard. When asked about it, she told the neighbor she was busy with the house, whatever that means." I thought about the footsteps in the hallway, the scratches on the floor. "Can I see photos from when the body was found?" "That's a police matter. I don't have access. Please, this is important." Patricia made another call. Pulled some strings. An hour later, we were looking at photographs on a police laptop, images from the scene where Lorraine Vickers had died. She'd been found in the upstairs hallway, collapsed near the linen closet. The closet door had been open, and in the photographs, you could clearly see into that closet. It was full of sheets and towels and boxes, exactly what you'd expect. But on the wall at the back of the closet, someone had written something in black marker. We had to zoom in to read it. "It keeps growing. Counted 47 rooms today. Can't find front door anymore. If you're reading this, get out while the house is still small." The room went silent. Dale cleared his throat. "That's clearly the delusion of someone in mental distress. Then explain the extra rooms," I said. "Explain how a house grows without anyone noticing." No one could. We stood there, looking at a dead woman's warning, written in a closet that was now a bathroom. I should have left then. Should have taken Patricia's offer to nullify the sale, taken the financial loss, walked away, but I'm stubborn. And part of me, the rational part that had bought this house in the first place, refused to accept that buildings could spontaneously generate rooms. Everyone left by noon. I spent the afternoon doing what I should have done from the beginning. I mapped the house. Every room, every closet, every space. I measured and documented and created a detailed floor plan of what actually existed. Ground floor, living room, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, laundry room, 2 pantries, and a study I was certain hadn't been there that morning. That was 8 rooms on the ground floor. The listing had specified 5. Second floor, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a linen closet, and a space labeled on my map as unknown room, because I couldn't determine its purpose. It was empty, windowless, with walls painted flat black. That was 9 rooms on the second floor. The listing had specified 4. I went to bed that night with 17 rooms documented, 12 more than the house was supposed to have. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of hammering. Not loud construction noise, quiet, distant hammering, like someone working several rooms away. Tap, 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 rhythmic and patient, and beneath it, the sound of sawing, and beneath that, the low murmur of conversation. I got up, grabbed the flashlight from my bedside, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was longer than it should be, significantly longer. Where there had been maybe 15 feet from my door to the staircase, there was now at least 30 feet, and at the far end, past the staircase, the hallway continued into darkness. I could see doors lining both sides, more doors than had been there when I went to sleep. The hammering was coming from behind one of those doors. I walked toward it, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As I passed the staircase, I glanced down. The stairs descended into blackness so complete my light couldn't penetrate it, and I could smell something rising from below. Sawdust and fresh paint and something organic, like growing things. The door where the hammering originated was closed. I put my hand on the knob. It was warm, almost hot. I opened it. The room beyond was under construction. Studs framed out walls that weren't finished. Drywall leaned against the framing. In the center of the space, a figure stood with its back to me, hammering something I couldn't see. It was wearing work clothes, jeans, a plaid shirt, a tool belt. But the proportions were wrong, the arms too long, the back too broad. And then it turned around. It had Lorraine Vickers's face, or a face that was trying to look like Lorraine's face based on photographs. The features were too smooth, too symmetrical, like a sculpture that almost captured the original but missed something essential. It smiled at me. "New owner," it said, in a voice that approximated human speech. Good. The house was getting lonely. The house was getting full. The house needed someone new to organize for. What are you? I'm the builder. I'm what keeps the house growing. Every house needs a builder, needs someone to add space, to create room for what needs to exist. Lorraine understood that eventually. She tried to fight it at first, tried to document, tried to understand, but eventually she accepted. She let me work. She stopped trying to reach the doors that lead out. The doors that lead out. They're still here. The front door, the back door, the side exit. They still exist somewhere in the house. But the house is very large now. It's been growing for 13 months, ever since I woke up. And the doors move. They're shy. They don't like to be found. I backed away slowly. The thing that wore Lorraine's face watched me with eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. "You can leave any time," it said, "if you can find the exit, but the house will keep growing whether you're here or not. It has momentum now. It wants to become something bigger. It wants to have basements that go down forever and attics that reach up into clouds and hallways that connect to other houses, other streets, other cities. It wants to be all houses, to absorb all spaces, and I'm helping it do that because that's what I am. That's what I've always been. I'm the part of houses that wants to grow. I ran back down the hallway, past doors that definitely hadn't been there before, past windows that looked out onto impossible views. Some showing the street I lived on, others showing forests, others showing nothing but darkness. I reached the staircase and started down, my flashlight beam sweeping wildly. The ground floor had changed. The rooms I'd documented were still there, but they'd been joined by others. I ran through spaces I didn't recognize. A library with shelves that disappeared into shadow, a greenhouse with plants I couldn't identify, a dining room with a table set for dozens of people who weren't there. I found doors and opened them desperately, looking for one that led outside. Some doors led to more rooms. Some led to stairways going up or down. Some led to hallways that branched in multiple directions. The house was a maze now, sprawling and illogical, and somewhere behind me I could hear the hammering continuing, the sound of the builder adding more space, more rooms, more iterations of itself. I finally found a door with a window that showed the street. The front door. Except it was in a room I didn't recognize. A formal entry hall with a chandelier and marble floors. I ran to it, grabbed the handle, pulled. It opened. I burst out into the night, stumbling down the front steps onto the lawn, gasping. Behind me, the house looked normal. 2 stories, exactly as it had appeared in the listing photographs. Lights off, quiet. The door swung slowly shut. I sat on the lawn until sunrise. I watched the house for any sign of movement, any indication of the impossible spaces I'd seen inside. It just sat there, a normal character home on a normal street. When the sun was fully up, I walked to my car, drove to a motel, and called Patricia Chow. "I'm accepting your offer to nullify the sale," I said. "I don't care about the financial loss. I'm not going back in that house." "Isaac, what happened?" "The house is still growing, and it's never going to stop." The sale was reversed. I signed documents, took a substantial loss, and walked away from the property. The house went back on the market, listed once again by the estate, once again priced below market value. It sold within a week to a young family from Medicine Hat. I tried to contact them, tried to warn them. They didn't respond. They thought I was a lunatic, probably, or a disgruntled buyer trying to sabotage the sale. I checked the address sometimes on Google Maps, using the Street View feature. The house looks normal. 2 stories, 6 rooms visible through the windows, exactly as it appears in the listing. But I know what's inside. I know that every night when the owners are asleep, the builder is working, adding rooms, extending hallways, growing the house from within, making it larger and stranger and more impossible, while the exterior remains unchanged. I wonder how long it will take the new owners to notice. I wonder if they've found the extra bathroom yet, the extra bedroom. I wonder if they've heard the hammering at night. I wonder if they'll try to map the house like I did, or if they'll accept it like Lorraine eventually did. If they'll stop trying to find the doors that lead out. If they'll become part of the house, the way the builder wants everyone to become. And I wonder what will happen when the house finally gets large enough. When the spaces inside connect to other basements, other attics, other houses. When it achieves what it wants, to be all houses, all spaces, one infinite labyrinth of rooms that goes on forever. I'm in an apartment again now, 10th floor. I chose it specifically because it's in a new building, nothing older than 5 years. Because I know that old houses remember things. Old houses want things. And sometimes, in the right circumstances, old houses start to grow. If you ever buy a house, do what I didn't do. Count the rooms carefully. Compare them to the floor plan. Check them every day for the first month. Because if you find an extra room, even one small closet that shouldn't exist, Get out immediately. Don't wait to see if it grows. Don't try to document it. Don't convince yourself there's a rational explanation. Just get out. Because some houses are still growing. And they're always looking for new occupants to feed on, new people to get lost in their expanding hallways, new victims to trap in spaces that multiply faster than anyone can map. The house at 447 Willow Crescent in Lethbridge looks normal from the outside, but inside, it has more rooms than any building should, and every night, it adds more. I hope the new owners figure that out before it's too late, before they stop being able to find the front door. The audio anomaly appeared at 2:47 a.m. during the automated overnight broadcast. I was monitoring from the station control room, running through my standard hourly checks, when the waveform on my screen spiked in a way that made no sense. A low-frequency pulse, well below the range of human hearing, embedded in the carrier signal of our transmission. It lasted exactly 4 seconds, then vanished, leaving no trace except the record in my log files. Protocol dictated I investigate any unexplained signal variations. Our broadcast license required strict adherence to frequency allocations, and unauthorized content could result in serious regulatory consequences. I isolated the segment, ran it through our analysis software, and applied a series of filters to understand what I was looking at. When I shifted the frequency up into the audible range, I heard the voice. My name is Catherine Merrick, and at 31 I was the night engineer for CKWM, a regional broadcaster serving the Peace River district of northern Alberta. I'd been with the station for 6 years, working my way up from production assistant to senior technical staff, and I'd earned a reputation for thoroughness and competence. I knew our equipment intimately. I knew every quirk of our transmitter, every idiosyncrasy of our mixing boards, every normal variation in our signal. This wasn't normal. The voice was female, speaking in a measured, calm tone, delivering what sounded like a news report. But the content made no sense. She was describing events that hadn't happened. A military deployment to Calgary, emergency evacuations from Edmonton, martial law declared in Red Deer. Specific dates in the past tense, detailed casualty figures, references to government agencies that didn't exist, and at the end of the 4-second segment she said, "This is CKWM emergency broadcast, continuing our coverage from the Cold Lake bunker. If you're receiving this transmission, please proceed immediately to your designated shelter. Do not attempt to return to urban centers. Do not trust official communications from compromised stations. We are the last free broadcaster in the Alberta region." I played it 3 more times, trying to make sense of it. The voice quality was wrong. It had the flat, slightly hollow sound of recordings from decades ago, analog tape with audible degradation. But it had appeared in our digital signal stream, embedded in a layer that should have been impossible to access without directly interfacing with our transmission equipment. I checked the control room logs. No one had been in the building except me since the evening shift ended at midnight. The doors were locked. The security system showed no breaches. I called my supervisor, a man named Graham Petrie, who served as our operations manager. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Graham, it's Catherine. We have a situation at the station." "What kind of situation?" An unauthorized signal appeared in our broadcast. Audio content I can't explain. "I need you to come in." He arrived 40 minutes later, his expression skeptical until I played him the recording. His face went pale. "That's impossible," he said. "Our transmission is digital, encrypted. There's no way someone could inject content into the signal without physical access to the transmitter, and that's locked behind 3 security doors." "I know, but it's there. 4 seconds of audio that shouldn't exist." We spent the next 2 hours checking every system, looking for signs of intrusion or malfunction. Everything was normal. Our equipment was operating within parameters. Our security hadn't been compromised. Yet the audio segment was there in the log files, undeniably real. Could it be bleed-through from another station? Graham suggested. Some kind of atmospheric propagation phenomenon. No station in range broadcasts on our frequency, and this isn't interference. It's embedded in our own signal, below audible frequencies. Someone would need to know exactly how our encoding works to place it there. Graham was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Delete it. The recording, the log entry, all of it. If the regulators find unauthorized content in our broadcast history, we could lose our license." Graham, "Delete it, Catherine. I'm serious. We'll monitor for recurrence, but we're not reporting something we can't explain." I understood his position. Broadcasting licenses were valuable commodities and regulatory compliance was non-negotiable. But something about the audio segment bothered me beyond the technical impossibility. The content itself was too specific, too detailed. This wasn't random noise or interference. Someone had crafted that message deliberately. I deleted the files as instructed, but I'd already made a backup copy on my personal drive. The anomaly appeared again 3 nights later. Same time, 2:47 a.m. Same duration, 4 seconds, but different content. This time, the voice was describing a facility, the Cold Lake Bunker, she called it. Concrete walls, 6 feet thick. Air filtration systems, stockpiles of food and water for 300 people. And then, chillingly, day 72 of continuous occupation. Supplies are adequate. Morale is declining. We've lost contact with all other shelter facilities. If you're receiving this transmission, you are not alone. We are still here. We are still broadcasting. I recorded it immediately, then checked the date and time against historical records. The Cold Lake area did have military installations. The CFB Cold Lake Air Force Base was one of Canada's primary fighter training facilities. But there was no public record of any underground bunker complex designed for civilian shelter. I called Graham. He was less patient this time. "You were supposed to delete." It happened again. Same phenomenon, different message. "Graham, this is something systematic. This is someone or something using our transmission equipment to broadcast messages we're not sending. That's paranoid. Then come in and listen to it." He came in. He listened. And this time I saw real fear in his expression. "We need to call someone," he said. "This is beyond equipment malfunction." "Call who? The CRTC? And tell them our station is broadcasting messages about military bunkers? We'll be investigated. Shut down. Possibly charged with hoax broadcasting." Then who? I'd been thinking about this. The military. CFB Cold Lake. If there's any truth to what this voice is describing, they would know. We placed the call at 4 a.m., reaching a duty officer who was skeptical until I sent him the audio files. He said he'd escalate to his superiors and hung up. We waited. At 6 a.m., 2 Canadian Armed Forces officers arrived at the station in an unmarked vehicle. They identified themselves as Major Elena Vasquez and Captain Trevor Huang from CFB Cold Lake Intelligence. They were polite but firm. "We need to see your transmission equipment," Major Vasquez said. "All of it." We gave them full access. They spent 3 hours examining our systems, running diagnostics, taking photographs. Finally, they called us into the control room. "Your equipment is fine," Captain Huang said. "No signs of tampering or intrusion. But we need you to understand something. The content you've been receiving is classified. Highly classified. You should not have access to it." "We don't have access to it," I said. "It's appearing in our signal without our input." "That's impossible," Major Vasquez said. But her tone suggested she didn't fully believe her own words. "What is the Cold Lake Bunker?" I asked. "What is this voice describing?" A long silence. Then Major Vasquez said, "During the Cold War, The Canadian government constructed a network of emergency bunkers designed to maintain continuity of government and communications in the event of nuclear war. Most were decommissioned in the early 90s. Some were kept in reserve status. The Cold Lake facility is one of those. It's never been publicly disclosed. And the broadcasts. In 1989, as part of an emergency preparedness exercise, civilian broadcasters in the region were provided with equipment that could receive and relay official emergency communications from the bunker network. The idea was that even if normal communications were disrupted, regional stations could continue broadcasting critical information. Your station, CKWM, was part of that program. That was over 30 years ago, Graham said. Any equipment from that program would have been removed decades ago. It should have been, Captain Huang agreed, but sometimes things get forgotten, especially in smaller regional stations that changed ownership or underwent renovations. Major Vasquez pulled out a tablet, showed us a schematic. This is the original equipment plan for CKWM's emergency broadcast integration. The receiver was installed in a sealed compartment in your transmitter housing. It was designed to be inaccessible during normal operations. If it's still there, and if it's still functional, it would be receiving signals from the bunker network automatically. But the bunker network isn't active, I said. You said it was decommissioned. It was. But decommissioned doesn't mean destroyed. The facilities still exist. The equipment still exists. And if someone activated it... Graham's expression changed. Are you telling me there's someone in that bunker broadcasting these messages? We're telling you that you need to disconnect your emergency receiver immediately, and you need to destroy any recordings you've made of these transmissions. This is a matter of national security. They supervised while I physically disconnected the receiver module from our transmitter. It was exactly where the schematic indicated, a small sealed unit that had been integrated into the system so long ago that none of the current staff knew it existed. When we opened it, we found it was still powered, still functional, still listening to frequencies that were supposed to be silent. The officers took the module with them. They made us sign documentation, agreeing not to discuss what we'd heard. They assured us the situation would be investigated and resolved. But 3 nights later, at 2:47 a.m., the anomaly appeared again. Impossible. The receiver was gone. There was no mechanism for the signal to appear in our broadcast. Yet there it was, 4 seconds of audio embedded in the carrier wave. The voice was different this time. Desperate. This is CKWM Emergency Broadcast. Day 91. Water filtration system is failing. We've sealed the lower levels, but contamination is spreading. We can hear them outside the doors now. They've learned to mimic human voices. They call to us using the names of our families. Don't trust anyone who tells you it's safe to leave shelter. Don't trust evacuation orders. Don't trust... The message cut off. I called Major Vasquez immediately. She and Captain Huang returned within 2 hours, this time with additional personnel and more sophisticated detection equipment. They tore apart our transmitter, searching for any possible source of the signal. They found nothing. This isn't possible, Captain Huang kept saying. The receiver is in our possession. There's no input mechanism. But Major Vasquez was looking at something on her tablet, her expression grim. The Cold Lake bunker, she said quietly. There's been activity. What kind of activity? Motion sensors triggered. Interior cameras showing movement. But when we sent personnel to investigate 3 days ago, the facility was empty. Sealed. No signs of occupation. Then what's triggering the sensors? She didn't answer. Instead, she made a phone call, speaking in low tones I couldn't hear. When she finished, she turned to me and Graham. You're going to shut down your overnight broadcasts, effective immediately. Go to daytime-only operations until further notice. We can't do that, Graham protested. We have a broadcast license that requires us to maintain. Your license will be amended. This is not a request. We complied. CKWM went dark from midnight to 6 a.m., officially due to equipment maintenance. The anomalies stopped. For 2 weeks, our overnight hours were silent and nothing appeared in our logs. Then, on day 15, my phone rang at 2:47 a.m. I was at home, asleep, but the ringtone woke me. The caller ID showed the station's main number. I answered. "Hello," the voice from the broadcasts spoke. "Catherine Merrick, night engineer. You've been listening. You've heard our warnings. You need to understand. The broadcasts are not coming from the past. They're coming from a future that's trying to prevent itself. The bunker exists in a state of temporal displacement. We're trapped in a loop, living out the same emergency over and over, broadcasting warnings to a time before it happens. And it's starting to happen. The timeline is converging. What we lived through is beginning. Who are you? I'm you, Catherine. I'm the version of you who survived long enough to reach the bunker. And I'm telling you, get out of Peace River. Get as far south as you can. It starts in the north. It always starts in the north. You have 3 weeks before the first confirmed cases. 6 weeks before the evacuations. 8 weeks before the military loses control. Cases of what? We don't know what it is. We just know it changes people, makes them into something else. Something that looks human but isn't. Something that spreads. And once it reaches critical mass, there's no stopping it. We tried. We failed. That's why we're broadcasting backward through time. That's why we're using your equipment. Because maybe, if someone hears us early enough, maybe the timeline can branch. Maybe it doesn't have to happen this way. The call ended. I sat in my dark bedroom, shaking. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as an elaborate hoax, but the voice had known my name, had known my position, and the fear in it had been genuine. I called Graham. I told him everything. He was silent for a long time. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I want to broadcast it. I want to warn people." "Catherine, we have no evidence. We have audio recordings that the military has classified. If we broadcast warnings about some kind of outbreak or invasion without credible sources, we'll be shut down immediately. We could face criminal charges for inciting panic. Then what do? We do our jobs. We maintain the station. We wait and see if anything actually happens, because right now, all we have is a series of unexplained audio anomalies and a phone call that could have been from anyone." He was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were wasting time. That somewhere in the north, something was beginning. Something that would spread. 3 weeks later, there was a news report of an unusual illness affecting several communities in the Northwest Territories. Flu-like symptoms that progressed to severe behavioral changes. Health Canada sent investigators. The story disappeared from the news cycle after 2 days. 6 weeks later, the first evacuation order was issued for Fort Simpson. Official reason: contaminated water supply. But footage leaked online showed military vehicles and personnel in hazmat suits. The footage was scrubbed from most platforms within hours. 8 weeks later, a no-travel advisory was issued for all of northern Alberta, Northwest Territories, and Yukon. Official reason: civil unrest and infrastructure failures. But I knew better. I'd heard the warnings. I'd listened to broadcasts from a future that was trying to prevent itself. I left Peace River, drove south to Calgary, then continued to Lethbridge. I quit my job at CKWM remotely, citing family emergency. Graham didn't argue. He left too. I don't know where he went. The official government position is that the northern situation is under control. Temporary disruptions due to a combination of factors. Infectious disease outbreak, supply chain issues, isolated incidents of violence. They insist there's no need for public panic. They insist the situation is being managed. But I still hear the broadcasts. Even without access to the station equipment, even without the emergency receiver, I hear them. They come through my phone at 2:47 a.m., through my laptop speakers, through my car radio when I'm driving at night. 4-second segments, warnings from a future that's becoming the present, and they're changing. The messages are more recent now. They're describing things that are happening right now, describing the quarantine zones, describing the changed ones and how they spread, describing the bunkers filling up with refugees who won't survive. Last night, the message said, "This is Catherine Merrick, broadcasting from Cold Lake Bunker. Day 106, we're the last station still transmitting. If you're hearing this, don't come north. Don't try to reach the shelters. They're already compromised." The changed ones have learned to open the doors from inside. They're patient. They wait. And when you sleep, The message cut off. But it will come again tomorrow, at 2:47 a.m. and the day after. Because I'm trapped in a loop now, living out the timeline I tried to warn myself about. I made it to a bunker. I survived long enough to become the voice on the broadcasts. And now I'm transmitting backward through time, hoping that some version of me, in some branch of the timeline, hears the warning early enough. Hoping that somewhere, Catherine Merrick makes a different choice. If you're reading this, if you have access to emergency broadcast systems, if you monitor frequencies that are supposed to be silent, listen carefully, because the warnings are real, the broadcasts are real, and the future they're describing isn't distant. It's happening now, it's spreading south, and soon everyone will hear the emergency broadcasts. By then, it will be too late. The manifest listed 47 passengers for Flight 237 from Winnipeg to Thompson. I counted 53 people boarding the aircraft. It was a routine Tuesday morning, the kind of shift I'd worked hundreds of times before. I was stationed at Gate 12 scanning boarding passes as passengers filed down the jetway toward the Dash 8 turboprop that would take them north to the mining regions. The gate area had been busy in that disorganized way regional airports get during shift changes, miners heading back to work sites, nurses rotating through remote health centers, families traveling to visit relatives in smaller communities. I'd scanned 47 boarding passes. 47 passengers whose tickets matched the manifest provided by the airline. But as I watched the last few people enter the jetway, I could see more figures moving down the tunnel toward the aircraft. People who hadn't scanned through my gate, people who had somehow bypassed the ticketing process. My name is Simran Bhatia, and at 28, I was a customer service agent for Northern Airways, a regional carrier that serviced remote communities across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Nunavut. I'd been with the company for 5 years, working my way up from ramp services to passenger processing, and I'd earned a reputation for attention to detail. I never missed discrepancies. I never let passengers through without proper documentation. But 6 people had just boarded an aircraft without scanning tickets. 6 people who weren't on my manifest. I grabbed my radio. "Gate supervisor, this is Simran at Gate 12. I have a situation." My supervisor, a man named Walter Gang, who'd been with Northern Airways for 20 years, responded immediately. "What kind of situation?" "I have extra passengers. People are on the aircraft who didn't board through my gate." "That's not possible. It's a single jetway. There's no other access point." "Walter, I'm telling you there are people on that plane who didn't scan boarding passes." "How many?" 6. A pause. "I'm coming down." Walter arrived within 2 minutes, his expression skeptical. We pulled up the manifest on the gate computer, confirmed the count, 47 passengers. Then we walked down the jetway to the aircraft, where the flight attendant, a woman named Claire Devereaux, was doing her final cabin check. "Claire," Walter said, "how many passengers do you count?" She glanced at her handheld counter. 47. "Full flight. Can you do a visual count? Physically count every person in a seat?" She looked confused but complied, walking slowly through the cabin, touching each seat back as she counted. When she returned to the front, her expression had changed. "There are 53 people on this aircraft," she said quietly. Walter's face went pale. "That's impossible. We only sold 47 tickets. Simran only scanned 47 boarding passes." "Then who are the extra 6? Claire asked. We looked down the cabin. Every seat was occupied. Passengers were settling in, stowing bags, fastening seatbelts. Everything looked normal. But somewhere in those rows were 6 people who had boarded an aircraft without tickets, without passing through security, without anyone noticing. "We need to check IDs," Walter said. "Match every passenger to the manifest. If 6 people are here without tickets, we'll identify them and remove them from the flight." It should have been simple. We walked through the cabin, Claire announcing that we were conducting a routine verification. Passengers produced their boarding passes and identification. We checked each one against the manifest. Every passenger matched. Every boarding pass was valid. Every ID corresponded to a name on our list. We checked 47 passengers, and all 47 were exactly where they should be, sitting in exactly the seats their tickets specified. But there were still 53 people in the cabin. "This is insane," Walter muttered. "We verified everyone. They're all accounted for. So who are the extras?" I looked down the cabin again, studying the passengers. And that's when I noticed something strange. In certain seats, scattered throughout the cabin, no pattern I could identify. There were people who didn't quite look right. Their features were slightly blurred, as if I was seeing them through a dirty lens. When I tried to focus on them directly, my eyes wouldn't quite lock onto their faces. "Walter," I said quietly, "do you see it? Some of the passengers look wrong." He followed my gaze. I watched his expression change as he noticed what I was seeing. "They're out of focus," he whispered. We approached the nearest one, a woman sitting in 8B wearing a blue coat, staring straight ahead. I could see her, could perceive her shape and color, but when I tried to see her face clearly, it slid away from my perception, like trying to remember a dream. "Ma'am," I said, "can I see your boarding pass?" She didn't respond, didn't turn her head, just kept staring forward. I reached out to touch her shoulder. My hand passed through her coat, through her body, through the seat, as if she wasn't entirely there. I jerked my hand back, a sound escaping my throat that was halfway between a gasp and a scream. Walter grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the aisle. "We need to deplane everyone," he said, his voice tight. "Right now." But before we could act, the captain's voice came over the PA system. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Ground crew, close the forward door." "Wait," Claire called toward the cockpit. "Captain, we have a situation." The door between the cabin and the cockpit was already closed. Locked. Standard procedure, once departure sequence began. Walter ran to the aircraft door, trying to signal the ground crew through the window, but the jetway was already retracting. Through the window, I could see the ramp agent giving the all-clear signal. "This is wrong," Walter said. "None of this is following procedure. We haven't cleared the cabin. We haven't resolved the passenger count issue." The engine started. The aircraft began to taxi. We were moving. Claire grabbed the interphone, calling the cockpit. "Captain, this is Claire. We need to return to the gate. We have an unresolved safety issue." The captain's voice crackled back. "Negative. We're cleared for departure. All pre-flight checks complete. What's the nature of the safety issue?" Claire looked at us, then back at the passengers. The blurred figures were still there, sitting motionless, staring forward. But the other passengers, the real passengers, seemed unaware. They were reading, looking at phones, talking to each other. Normal pre-flight behavior. Claire paused. "There are passengers on board who didn't properly check in." "How many?" "6. A long silence. Then, "Claire, I'm looking at the weight and balance. We're showing 47 souls on board. Fuel is calculated for 47 passengers plus cargo. If you're telling me we have 53 people, we're overweight. We can't fly. Walter grabbed the interphone from Claire. Captain, this is Walter Gagne, gate supervisor. We need to abort the flight and return to the gate immediately. This is not a drill. The aircraft stopped on the taxiway. Through the cockpit door, we could hear the captain and first officer arguing. Then the PA clicked on. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor technical issue. We'll be returning to the gate momentarily. The aircraft turned, beginning the taxi back. But as we moved, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The blurred passengers were becoming clearer, more solid, more present, and they were turning their heads now, looking at the real passengers around them, studying them, and the real passengers were starting to notice, starting to react. I heard a woman gasp. A man said, "What the hell?" A child started crying. The man in 12A, who'd scanned his boarding pass normally, who I'd verified just minutes ago, was staring at the figure in 12B. "There's someone in that seat," he said. But there wasn't before. The seat was empty when I sat down. I'm sure of it. The figure in 12B turned to look at him. Its face was becoming clearer now, features resolving. It was male, middle-aged, wearing clothes that looked decades out of date. A suit jacket from the 1980s, a tie with a pattern I recognized from old photographs. And it spoke. Its voice was flat, emotionless, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Flight 237, November 12th, 1986. Winnipeg to Thompson. We never arrived. The cabin erupted. Passengers were shouting, standing, trying to move away from the figures that were appearing more solidly among them. Claire was calling for calm, but no one was listening. Walter grabbed my arm. "What did it say? 1986. I pulled out my phone, searching the airline's history database. Flight 237, November 12th, 1986. The article was there, archived in the Transportation Safety Records, Northern Airways. Flight 237-8 aircraft disappeared en route from Winnipeg to Thompson on November 12th, 1986. 6 souls on board, 2 crew, 4 passengers. Aircraft never arrived at destination. No wreckage ever found. Declared lost over wilderness between Lake Winnipeg and Thompson. Cause undetermined. 6 souls, I whispered. Not 47. 6. I looked back at the cabin. The blurred figures were fully present now. 6 of them scattered among the real passengers, and I could see them clearly for the first time. They were decomposed, not dramatically, not like movie corpses, just wrong. Skin with a grayish pallor, eyes that didn't quite focus, movements that were slightly delayed, slightly mechanical, and they were all staring at the cockpit. The figure in 8B stood up, so did the one in 12B, one by one, and all 6 of the impossible passengers rose from their seats and began moving forward, toward the front of the aircraft, toward the cockpit door. "Claire," Walter said urgently, "lock the cockpit. Now, use the emergency protocol." She grabbed the interphone, but before she could speak, the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out, his expression confused. "What the hell is going on back?" He stopped. He saw them. The 6 figures moving toward him in the narrow aisle. His face went white. "You need to turn back," one of them said. The one wearing the 1980s suit. "We've been waiting to deliver the message. Flight 237 cannot reach Thompson. If it does, everyone dies. That's what happened to us. We took off. We flew the route, and somewhere over the wilderness, something went wrong. We don't remember what. We just remember falling, and then waking up still in our seats, still on the plane, but not in the air anymore. Not in any place we recognized." The captain backed toward the cockpit. "This is impossible. You're not real. We're as real as we need to be. We've been trying to board this flight for 38 years. Every time Northern Airways schedules Flight 237 to Thompson, we try, but we're usually not strong enough. Usually we can't manifest, but today, conditions were right. Today we made it onto the aircraft, and now we can warn you. Warn us about what? Don't fly to Thompson, not on Flight 237. The designation is cursed, the route is compromised. There's something in the airspace over that stretch of wilderness, something that pulls aircraft down. We felt it. We're still feeling it. We're trapped in that moment. Falling forever, hitting the ground forever, dying forever. And if you fly this route, you'll join us. The aircraft reached the gate. The jetway connected. The door opened. The 6 figures began to fade, their solidity diminishing, their features blurring again. The one in the suit looked at me directly. "Tell them," it said. "Tell the company. Cancel Flight 237. Retire the designation. Choose a different route or different numbers. Break the pattern before more of us are trapped." Then they were gone. Just gone. 53 passengers became 47 in the space between heartbeats. The cabin was silent except for the sound of people crying. Claire was on her knees in the aisle, hyperventilating. Walter was leaning against the bulkhead, his face the color of old paper. The captain made an announcement. Mechanical failure. Flight cancelled. Passengers would be rebooked. Apologies for the inconvenience. But he knew, we all knew, this wasn't mechanical failure. This was something else entirely. I wrote a report, documented everything I'd witnessed. Walter and Claire signed as corroborating witnesses. We submitted it to Northern Airways management along with a formal recommendation to retire the Flight 237 designation. The company response came 3 days later. Our report had been reviewed by the safety committee. Our recommendations were noted. However, after careful consideration, no changes would be made to flight designations or routes. The events described in our report were attributed to mass hysteria brought on by stress and equipment malfunction. Walter resigned immediately. Claire transferred to ground operations, refusing to fly again. I stayed, hoping I could make a difference from inside the company. Flight 237 to Thompson continued its normal schedule. 3 flights per week. Nothing unusual reported. Passengers arrived safely. No incidents until last month. Flight 237 took off from Winnipeg on a Tuesday morning. Routine flight, 47 passengers. The aircraft never arrived in Thompson. Search and rescue found nothing. No wreckage, no emergency locator signals, no trace. 47 people disappeared over the same wilderness where 6 people had disappeared in 1986. I wonder if they're trapped now, like the others. I wonder if they're experiencing an endless falling, an endless impact, an endless death. I wonder if they'll try to board Flight 237 in another 38 years, trying to warn the next group of passengers about the thing in the airspace that pulls aircraft down. I quit Northern Airways. I don't work in aviation anymore. I can't, because I know the truth. I know that some flight designations should never be used again. I know that some routes cross territories that aren't empty, that aren't safe, that harbor things we don't understand. And I know that the 6 passengers from 1986 are still out there, still trying to board, still trying to warn people. Because they're trapped in a moment that never ends, and the only way they can interact with our world is to manifest on the flight that killed them, to try to prevent it from happening again. If you ever book a flight and notice the designation seems familiar, if you ever board an aircraft and feel like there are more passengers than there should be, if you ever see someone sitting in a seat who looks just slightly wrong, get off that plane. Don't wait for explanations. Don't trust the crew's reassurances. Just get off. Because some flights are scheduled to destinations they'll never reach, and the passengers who board them don't die just once. They die over and over, forever, in the moment between leaving and arriving. Flight 237 is still on Northern Airways' schedule, still departing from Winnipeg, still heading to Thompson, And somewhere in the wilderness between the two cities, something waits in the airspace. Something that pulls aircraft down. Something that has been feeding on passengers for decades. Don't fly Flight 237. Tell everyone you know. Because the next disappearance could happen any day now. And when it does, those passengers will join the others in the endless falling. Forever. Who aged backward. The girl in the hospital bed was 7 years old yesterday. Today, she was 6. I discovered the change during my morning rounds, checking vitals and updating charts for the pediatric ward patients. Lily Ashford, admitted 4 days ago with a persistent fever of unknown origin, had been stable overnight. Her temperature had normalized. Her blood work had improved. By all medical indicators, she was recovering. But when I looked at her sleeping face, something was different. The features were softer, rounder. The bone structure of her jaw was less defined. Her hands, resting on top of the blanket, were smaller. I checked the admission photos we'd taken when she arrived. In those images, Lily looked like a typical 7-year-old. Adult teeth coming in, losing the cherubic quality of early childhood, transitioning toward the lankier build of middle childhood. The girl in the bed looked younger, unmistakably younger. My name is Dr. Amara Singh, and at 36, I was a pediatric resident at St. Michael's Hospital in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'd completed my medical degree at the University of Saskatchewan and was in my 2nd year of residency, specializing in infectious diseases. I'd seen unusual presentations before. Rare conditions, diagnostic puzzles, cases that required extensive research and collaboration, but I'd never seen a child age backward. I called my attending physician, Dr. Raymond Kowalski, a pediatrician with 28 years of experience. He arrived within 10 minutes, reviewed the admission photos, and examined Lily carefully. "This isn't possible," he said quietly. "Children don't regress physically. Not like this. Not overnight. But she's clearly younger than she was yesterday." He pulled up her chart on the tablet, reviewing every entry. Height, weight, vital signs, all documented meticulously by the nursing staff. Yesterday, Lily had measured 122 centimeters in height. This morning, she measured 118 centimeters. "That's a 4-centimeter decrease in height in less than 24 hours, Dr. Kowalski said. "That's impossible. Bones don't shrink, not in children, not at this rate." "Then how do you explain the measurements?" "I can't, which means we're either experiencing equipment failure or..." He trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. We called for portable X-ray equipment. 30 minutes later, we were reviewing images of Lily's skeletal structure. Dr. Kowalski compared them to the X-rays taken on admission. The bone age had changed. On admission, skeletal maturity had been consistent with a 7-year-old. In the current images, bone age appeared closer to 6. Growth plates had regressed. The degree of fusion in her wrist bones had decreased. "This violates every principle of developmental biology," Dr. Kowalski said. "Bones don't unmature. Development doesn't run backward." Lily woke up while we were discussing the results. She looked around the room with wide eyes, saw us standing near her bed, and started crying. Not the frustrated crying of a 7-year-old, but the frightened, inconsolable crying of a much younger child. Her mother, Jennifer Ashford, who'd been sleeping in the chair beside the bed, woke immediately. She rushed to comfort Lily, then looked at us with confusion. "Why is she crying like that? She hasn't cried like this in years." "Mrs. Ashford," I said carefully, "has Lily seemed different to you today? Has anything about her behavior changed?" Jennifer frowned, studying her daughter. "She does seem, I don't know, smaller. Is that a strange thing to say?" Dr. Kowalski pulled up the admission photos on his tablet, showed them to Jennifer. "Does Lily look different to you in these photos compared to how she looks now?" Jennifer stared at the images for a long time. She looks older in the photos, but that's impossible. These were taken 4 days ago. We know it seems impossible, but we're observing physical changes we can't explain. Lily appears to be regressing in age, becoming younger. Jennifer's face went white. That's insane. People don't get younger. We agree it's unprecedented. That's why we need to run more tests. We need to understand what's happening. Over the next 6 hours, we performed a comprehensive battery of tests. Brain imaging, comprehensive metabolic panels, genetic screening, hormone levels, everything we could think of that might explain the phenomenon. The results were baffling. Lily's telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of chromosomes that shorten with age, were longer than they'd been on admission. Telomeres don't lengthen, they shorten progressively throughout life as cells divide. But Lily's had increased in length, suggesting her cells were experiencing some kind of reverse aging process. Her hormone levels had shifted to match those of a younger child. Her immune system markers suggested reduced maturity. Even her tooth development had regressed. Her adult incisors, which had been partially erupted on admission, had receded back into the gums. By evening, Lily looked and acted like a 5-year-old. She'd lost vocabulary. Her fine motor skills had diminished. She wanted her mother to read picture books she'd outgrown 2 years ago. Jennifer was hysterical. "What's happening to my daughter? Why is she disappearing?" "She's not disappearing," Dr. Kowalski said, though his tone lacked conviction. "She's here. She's stable. We're doing everything we can to understand and stop this process." But we didn't know how to stop it. We consulted specialists remotely: endocrinologists, geneticists, developmental biologists. No one had seen anything like it. The consensus was that it was medically impossible, which meant either our observations were flawed or we were witnessing something that fell outside the boundaries of known medical science. On the morning of day 6, Lily was 4 years old. She spoke in simple sentences. She cried for her mother constantly. She didn't remember being in the hospital. When Jennifer showed her photos of herself at age 7, Lily didn't recognize the girl in the pictures. "That's not me," she said. "That girl is big. I'm little." The hospital administration convened an emergency ethics committee. The case was unprecedented. There were questions about documentation, about research protocols, about whether we should be publishing this in medical literature or keeping it confidential to protect the family's privacy. But those debates became irrelevant by day 7. Lily was 3 years old. She was in diapers. She couldn't feed herself, and she was starting to forget her mother's name. Jennifer hadn't left the hospital room except to use the bathroom. She held Lily constantly now, as if physical contact could somehow anchor her daughter to the age she should be. But it wasn't working. Lily was slipping backward through her own timeline, losing years instead of gaining them. I was exhausted, having slept in the residence room for brief intervals between rounds. Dr. Kowalski looked worse. He'd taken this case personally, seeing it as a failure of his decades of experience. And we still had no answers. On day 8, I was reviewing research literature in the hospital library, searching for any documented cases of reverse aging, progeria in reverse, anything that might provide a framework for what we were witnessing. And I found something. A research paper from 1973, published in an obscure Canadian medical journal. The case of a patient in rural Alberta who'd experienced progressive age regression following exposure to an unidentified environmental contaminant. The patient had regressed from age 32 to apparent infancy over the course of 3 weeks. The case had been dismissed as a hoax or a psychological disorder, as no biological mechanism for such regression was known. But the symptoms described matched what we were seeing with Lily. And the paper included one crucial detail. The patient had been camping in a specific region of Jasper National Park, when the symptoms began. Near a small lake called Mirror Lake. I called Jennifer into the conference room. Before Lily got sick, were you traveling? Were you camping anywhere? Jennifer looked confused. Yes, we took a family trip 3 weeks ago, camping in the Rockies. Where specifically? Jasper National Park. We camped near a beautiful little lake. Very remote. The water was incredibly clear, almost like a mirror. Lily loved it. She spent hours playing by the shore. My heart rate accelerated. Was it called Mirror Lake? I think so, yes. How did you know? I showed her the 1973 research paper, watched her face change as she read. This happened before? To someone else? Once that was documented. Maybe more times that weren't. The paper suggests there's something in that lake, some kind of environmental factor, that triggers this condition. But what? What could cause someone to age backward? The researcher didn't know. The investigation was shut down before they could identify the mechanism, but they noted that water samples from the lake showed unusual properties, high concentrations of certain minerals, unusual electromagnetic readings, and something else. Traces of what they described as temporally displaced particles, whatever that means. Dr. Kowalski had joined us. He read the paper, his expression grim. This is fringe science. Temporal displacement isn't a real medical concept. Neither is reverse aging, I said. But we're witnessing it. And if there's even a chance that this lake is the source, we need to investigate. We contacted Parks Canada. They were skeptical but agreed to review their records for Mirror Lake. The response came back within hours. The lake had been closed to public access since 1974. Following the incident described in the research paper, it was marked as a contaminated site, though the specific contamination was classified. Classified, Jennifer said. Why would a lake contamination be classified? No one had an answer, but Dr. Kowalski made calls. He reached out to federal health authorities, to environmental agencies, to anyone who might have information about Mirror Lake. Most calls went unreturned, but one researcher from Natural Resources Canada called back. Dr. Helena Chu, a geologist specializing in anomalous geological formations. She spoke carefully, clearly aware she was navigating sensitive territory. Mirror Lake sits atop an unusual geological structure, she said. There's a subsurface formation we don't fully understand. It creates localized temporal distortions. Time moves differently there. Not by much. We're talking microseconds of variation, but enough to have biological effects on certain organisms. Temporal distortions, Dr. Kowalski said. That's not scientifically. I'm aware how it sounds, but the phenomenon is documented. It's related to the crystal structure of certain mineral deposits in the bedrock. They create a kind of temporal lens effect. And in rare cases, exposure to water from the lake. Water that's been in contact with those minerals for extended periods can cause biological systems to experience time differently. You're saying the lake made Lily age backward. I'm saying prolonged contact with water from that lake can disrupt the normal biological aging process. Usually it's subtle, skin appearing more youthful, hair regaining color. But in children, whose development is more rapid and less stable, the effects can be dramatic. Can it be reversed? A long pause. In the 1973 case, the patient continued to regress until she stopped. Until what? Until they reached an apparent age of 0, infant state, and then they stopped existing, not dying exactly. They just ceased to be, as if they'd regressed beyond birth, beyond conception, to a point where they'd never existed at all. The conference room was silent. How long? Jennifer whispered. How long until that happens to Lily? The 1973 patient experienced the complete regression over 19 days. Your daughter is on day 8, if the progression matches. 11 days, Jennifer said. "We have 11 days to figure out how to stop this." Dr. Chu provided contact information for a research team that had been quietly studying the Mirror Lake phenomenon for decades. They arrived at the hospital the next day. 2 physicists and a biologist, all of whom treated the case with the seriousness it deserved. They explained that the temporal distortion couldn't be reversed directly. Once someone was exposed, the process would run its course. But they had a theory. If Lily could be exposed to a temporal field of the opposite polarity, one that accelerated time rather than reversing it, the 2 effects might cancel each other out. The problem was that such fields were theoretical. Creating one would require equipment that didn't exist, but they could try. They could build a prototype. It would take every day of the 11 we had remaining, and there was no guarantee it would work. But it was the only option. I watched Lily over the next days as she continued to regress. 4 years old, became 3, became 2. She stopped speaking in sentences, stopped recognizing her mother except as a comforting presence, became an infant who cried and slept and needed constant care. Jennifer never left her side. She held Lily as she became a 1-year-old, then a 6-month-old, then a newborn. And on day 17, when Lily had regressed to the appearance of a weeks-old infant, the research team arrived with their prototype device. It looked like something from science fiction. A ring of superconducting magnets surrounding a bed, connected to power supplies and computer systems that filled half the hospital room. The team explained it would create a localized temporal field that should, theoretically, counteract the regression effect. They had one chance. Once activated, the device would either work or it wouldn't. And if it didn't work, Lily would continue to regress beyond birth, beyond existence, and there would be nothing anyone could do. Jennifer held Lily one last time, kissed her tiny forehead, and placed her in the center of the device. The team activated the field. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then Lily's form began to shimmer, to blur, as if she existed in multiple states simultaneously. The monitors went haywire. The temperature in the room dropped, and then there was a sound like thunder, and everything stabilized. Lily lay in the bed, crying. We checked her vitals, measured her, examined her. She was 7 years old again, exactly 7. As if the regression had never happened. The temporal field had worked. The 2 distortions had canceled each other out, resetting Lily to her proper biological age. She recovered over the next week. Her memory of the regression was fragmented. She remembered being in the hospital, remembered feeling strange, but the experience of becoming younger was like a dream she couldn't quite recall. Mirror Lake remains closed to the public. The research team continues to study the phenomenon, looking for other locations where similar temporal distortions might occur. And Jennifer has become an advocate for geological hazard awareness, speaking about her daughter's experience despite the skepticism and ridicule it generates. Dr. Kowalski retired 6 months later. He told me he couldn't practice medicine anymore, knowing there were phenomena beyond the boundaries of our understanding, conditions we had no framework to treat. I stayed. I finished my residency. I became a pediatric specialist, but I never forgot Lily Ashford and the 17 days when she aged backward, disappearing into her own past. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing unusual cases, I wonder how many other temporal hazards exist across Canada's vast wilderness. How many other lakes or caves or geological formations harbor properties that can bend time, that can make people age backward or forward, that can trap them in loops or displace them from their proper moment in history? Mirror Lake is marked and closed, but there are thousands of remote lakes across the Canadian Shield, across the Rockies, across the boreal forest, and we can't monitor them all. If you ever camp in remote areas, if you find a lake that seems too perfect, water that's too clear, a place that makes you feel slightly disoriented or makes time seem to pass strangely, leave. Don't drink the water. Don't let your children play in it. Don't convince yourself that the strange feeling is just the altitude or the isolation, because some places exist outside of normal time. Some places can steal your future or your past, and once you're exposed, the only question is whether we can build the equipment to save you before you disappear entirely. Lily was lucky. We had just enough time, just enough warning, just enough theoretical knowledge to attempt a rescue. The next person might not be.